Live from the Africa TV studios in South Korea, fans witnessed greatness as two heavyweight Brood Wars stars triumphed in the tournament's round of 4 and rightfully took their spot in the Season 13 Grand Final. Determined in a best-of-7 showdown, Terran star Light clashed with Protoss veteran Bisu for a seat at the Grand Finals table. The players were off to Allegro for Game 1, where a long and stressful match took place on an almost resource-dried map. The first real attack came at the 11.5-minute mark, when Bisu attempted to assault the choke point, leading to Light's base. Both players fought down to their very last handful of units, but Light prevailed with a little help from his local SCVs. The north of the map was covered in red as Light researched upgrades and flooded his base with mines. Bisu turned to Arbiters to recall Dragoons inside of his opponent's main. They caused heavy destruction, but the attack was eventually thwarted. Approaching the 34-minute mark, Light had an answer for everything. Siege tanks were everywhere, so Zealots became ineffective. Arbiters themselves couldn't do anything at low energy, so Bisu handed the marathon Game 1 over to Light.
진짜 잘 막아냈어요.
지금 멈추지 않고 이게 몰아치는 거 좀 막아내면서 이제 인구수 격차가 벌어지지. 취재 이재호.
After a brief intermission, the players entered the map of Eclipse, where an entirely different story unfolded. Light went for an early all-in, with a battalion of Marines under his command and a small group of SCVs to take the fodder. Bisu was thrown off guard. Photon cannons couldn't be built in time, so Bisu conceded.
빠르게 지금 또 건설을 하려고 하고 있고.
네.
아, 포지션이
와,
너무
이재호.
좋아요.
네, 지금 여기서 바리케이드처럼
With Light now 2 up in the series, Bisu played cautiously on the map of Monopoly. He was determined to take control of the series and prevent his South Korean counterpart from extending his semi-finals lead. Bisu had expanded his base and doubled his workers, while Light concentrated on his main. Light wanted to apply pressure. An attack at the 7.5-minute mark would change everything, as a single invisible Dark Templar became the star of the show.
또 썰고 또 썰고
컴셋이
컴셋이 없어요. 취재.
Bisu had finally put a point on the board and disrupted Light's confidence. Game 4 would take place on Butter, where Bisu went for an early harass with a proxy gateway. This play forced Light to bunker down and weather the storm, all while Bisu teched towards Dragoons and Reavers in the mid-game. Vulture mines found their targets on the Protoss players' side of the field as the army count started to sway in Bisu's favour. Once carriers came into play, Light immediately answered with Goliaths. Once fully upgraded, Light had both the land and air covered in his main attacking force. After the Protoss star lost his natural, a base race started to break out. The clock was ticking as both players' main forces entered each other's bases. A fleet of carriers won Game 4 for Bisu. Both players stood 2 games aside in the fight for a spot in the Grand Final. Light's lead in the ASL was challenged. Redemption had to be found on the massive map of Vermeer. Planning for the long game, Bisu branched out with a 3rd Nexus, while Light bunkered down with his 2 command centres. Drawing first blood, Dragoons would be the unit of choice for Bisu. A dangerous move, considering the amount of siege tanks Light had in play. Light occupied the ground between Bisu's bases. An attack from 3 sides unfolded, and Bisu tried to retake the lost vantage point. Light disposed of the Protoss army and advanced even further into Bisu's base. The Terran player continuously sent reinforcements, and under the cover of siege tank fire, he rightfully claimed Game 5. Light was only a single game away from taking a position in the Season 13 Grand Finals. He needed this win, so it was time to knuckle down on the map of Revolver. Caution was taken, as both players expanded by the 4-minute mark. Bisu lost units through curiosity. Vultures were once more in play to prevent Bisu from gathering intel. Light made a play for No Man's Land. Similar to the previous game, he implemented his siege tank strategy and crept forward with an impenetrable force. Now on Bisu's doorstep, the interceptors from his carriers were blasted out of the sky by Goliaths. Bisu was faced with a very real threat as siege tanks made their way into his natural.
대답이 안 나옵니다.
인터셉트 없이 깡통됐습니다.
완벽.
제제.
With a versatile army composition, Light defeated his opponent and claimed his spot in the ASL Season 13 Grand Final. With the first ASL Season 13 Grand Finalist found, another would rise to challenge him at the Afrika TV studios in South Korea. Group A leader and Season 5 victor Rain was chasing another ASL victory. His challenger in the round of 4 would be 5-time KCM Race Survival champion Solkey, who was looking to make waves and earn his first ASL title. War broke out on the map of Revolver for game number 1, as Rain made plans to cut travel distance with a mid-map proxy gateway. Solkey did well to foil the rush, but he had to pre-plan a counter-attack while defending his natural if he wanted to stay ahead of Rain. Zerglings made their way into the Protoss base as the switch completely flipped on Rain. Workers were pulled to defend the single base as the Protoss players' economy started to collapse. Zerglings covered the map, leaving Rain no choice but to hand this one over to Solkey. Taking control of Game 2's Allegro was imperative for both players, as the large map offered many resources over a long distance. Playing much more defensively, Rain teched fast towards Corsairs, while Solkey used Zerglings to keep his opponent at bay and advance with a handful of Hydralisks. Under the cover of darkness, Dark and High Templars entered the battle, but Solkey had the vision and eliminated the threat quickly. Mutalisks tried to deal some significant poke damage in the centre of Rain's main, but they were forced out by a pocket of Dragoons. Ticking past the 13-minute mark, Rain and Solkey entered a battle for No Man's Land, where psionic storms and lurker spikes created large casualties on both sides of the conflict. Solkey continued the push at multiple junctions on the map, but Rain's forces were strong and large in numbers. Protoss ground infantry were distributed across the north of the map in small but precise attacks. With Solkey suppressed, Rain found his first win. Now on even footing, Solkey and Rain took a quick breather before loading into Game 3's Eclipse, a much smaller map where players grow more territorial the longer the game goes on. Approaching the 5-minute mark, Rain got a starport up and running, while Solkey took the resource lead with 3 hatcheries. While Corsairs offered anti-air support, Rain's Zealots advanced on Solkey's turf. Mutalisks found value, while Scourge sent the Protoss air units on the retreat. A counter-attack was thwarted with one well-placed Psystorm. Solkey's flyers left in a hurry with their health in a critical state. A sea of Hydralisks poured onto the battlefield to reinforce Solkey's flyers. Mutalisks sacrificed themselves to kill off Rain's High Templars and deny him the use of psionic storms. Without the storms to deal with the large amount of Hydralisks, Rain quickly ran out of options. Solkey claimed another glorious win. The Zergstar made plans to extend his lead in Game 4's map of Vermeer. Zerglings came out early to harass Rain. Some of them managed to breach the Protoss wall and make their way into the mineral line. Not fazed by the continuous wave of Zerglings, Rain's first Corsair scouted out Solkey's base and learned of his plans to transition into air units before the 6-minute mark. Mutalisks were in the primary position to pick off probes from Rain's natural, but a mass of Corsairs fended off the air assault. A battle in the sky saw Overlords and Scourge drop continuously to the fast and grouped up Corsair fleet. The unit count swung heavily in the Protoss player's favour, enough for him to directly assault Sulky's third almost unchallenged. Sulky barely survived, but it was this attack near the 17-minute mark that saw Rain punish Sulky to an unrecoverable state. 2 games aside, Rain brought the series back in his favour, but he wasn't out of the woods yet. Both ASL stars entered the map of Butter as the tension rose on the Afrika TV main stage. Rain faked a cannon rush in Sulky's natural, which was enough to make him react. The taunt was answered in kind with a small horde of Zerglings. They proceeded past the Protoss blockade and made their way into the heart of Rain's main. 2 Zealots held off the attack, but the job was far from over. The waves didn't stop. More and more Zerglings entered Rain's base, while Zealots kept a firm stance. Sulky went all in. With 2 photon cannons, Rain's natural was heavily fortified. Sulky had committed too much and was severely behind in resources. Capitalising on Sulky's mistakes and playing around his rush, the Protoss Master claimed the last game of the round of 4 and advanced to the Season 13 Grand Finals. Light versus Rain. Don't miss a minute of the action on the Afrika TV Esports YouTube channel as an ASL champion is crowned on April 9th.
Thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button to keep up to date with the amazing esport content from around the gaming globe. Only on Unbeaten Esports.